So, hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. It's really great to have you here. It's a Friday, and do you know what? I had a tattoo done yesterday, and it was so painful. I don't know why I'm still getting tattoos at 36, but yes, I spent all day long in a tattoo parlour from, what time did I get there? 10:30 in the morning until 10 at night. So today, I feel bloody tired, and it hurts a lot, and I'm a bit of a baby when it comes to pain. But anyway, I hope you're having a good week. Lionsgate has passed us by, and since it has, my energy is actually feeling a hell of a lot better. Still learning what Lionsgate really is, but I could definitely tell it's affected my energy. So, in this week's edition of the Soul Sync, I am speaking to someone that I found to be so interesting. His name is Colin Flaherty, and he's a spiritual medium, and his journey is not like any medium story that I've ever heard before. He has been in prison. He was very candid about a suicide attempt. He spent time in a tribe, and he taught himself mediumship. So he's not someone that went into mediumship believing it. You know, he was very, very, very skeptical and very evidence-based. And I could really relate to a lot of what Colin said, actually, with my own journey. His story and, his candidness really did blow me away. And he's one guest that I will certainly remember for a very long time. He's actually coming back onto the Soul Sync in a few weeks' time to actually talk in depth about his time in the tribe and all that he learned when he was in the tribe. So it's really interesting, and I think you're really going to enjoy this episode in particular. Please do, if you are watching this on YouTube and want to stay in the link with the Soul Sync podcast. I'm sitting here with a crystal ball, by the way. I do like this crystal ball. It's very nice. But anyway, as I was saying, so if you are watching on YouTube, you'll see me holding the crystal ball. So if you are on YouTube, please do subscribe, because then you'll know when the latest episodes are out. We've got some really amazing guests over the next few weeks, people whose stories range from everything from near-death experience survivors to a medium who's coming on who's going to talk about the tragic death of her beloved partner, and then how he communicated with her back in the round that we're in now. So there's so many interesting stories, and we're even going to hear from someone who escaped from a messianic even cult. I could barely say it, barely get me words out. It's the tattoo, I tell you. So I think you're really going to enjoy some of the episodes coming up. So please do subscribe on YouTube if you listen to it there. But without further ado, let me introduce to you Colin Flaherty. Now, his spiritual awakening began after a troubled and self-destructive youth. Like I said, he spent time in a tribe, and also he's travelled all over the place, taught himself mediumship. So without further ado, my conversation with Colin Flaherty. So, Colin, firstly, a massive warm welcome to the Soul Sync podcast.
I'm very humbled and privileged. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, Colin, I'm just as honoured and privileged to have you on, so thank you. So, your story, I was reading through the notes this afternoon, and I must admit, I think there's going to be some common ground in our conversation today. I really do. So, to start with, take us back in time, Colin, to where this all started.
So you mean the spiritual aspect or pre-spiritual?
I guess, take us back to, give us a bit of a flavour of your childhood, because I know that your mother was a medium and a spiritualist. And what I found quite interesting, Colin, was the fact that you weren't exposed to any spiritualist concepts or ideas during your upbringing. So I guess I want to go right back to there.
Yeah, that might sound a bit strange to some people to think that, well, because my mum, my gran and my great-gran were all of that ilk. Mm-hmm. And I guess it would appear strange to some people to think, well, your mum was a spiritualist, a medium. She had all that understanding. Why didn't she give any of it to you? And although obviously I've stated that she didn't, in some ways she did, because if you think of morals, ethical code, living in a good way, as I look back on life, even though I paid no attention to it at the time, there were those things about being respect for things, for people. She did try and instill that in me. I obviously didn't listen in that period because I went the opposite way and totally ignored ethics, morals, all of those things. And so from the age of around 14, and I say 14 because in that period, that's when my mum and dad got divorced. So it's well known for adults that when you look at a kid's trauma, lifestyle, all of these things, bad behavior, however you want to label it, there's always a trigger. I'm not the one and only. There's a million kids out there across the planet that have had a point in their life that have caused them some emotional, mental difficulties. I was one of them, one of the many. And so from 14, it was a rebellious thing. I don't know how to label it, in what bag to put it, if you like, but it obviously did something internally. And I rebelled. I was totally, from that point on, self-destructive, selfish, aggressive, angry as hell child. And obviously as you get older and then you're out of school, I was moved away from my siblings, my brothers and sisters, because I was uncontrollable by my mum. So then I ended up being moved to Watford with my dad, who was staying with his mum and dad, who were obviously my grandparents. And I settled for a bit, and then it all just went up in the air. And it was, I don't know why, one day it just did. And so, yeah, completely, without going into massive detail, because that's pointless, but I had no intention of wanting to stay even on this earth. And there are times, because I've dealt in these fields, I've worked in these fields subsequently because of my previous life, previous years, where there are those that say that, but it's more of a call for help. So you do something that might be detrimental to your health, whether it's recorded as a suicide attempt or things of that nature, but you've made sure that there are people around that can help, or that you've put yourself in a position, still traumatic for every individual, believe you me, to have to even do that. But I did my very best to be secluded away. And I say that seriously because my whole intent was, I don't want to be here, literally. And yet, never doubt the divine, because it matters not. It matters not how much you think you've secured your place to do whatever it is you're going to do. If there's any reason that you should be here, there is always going to be someone that appears out of the blue, and indeed they did on 2 occasions, absolutely. And yeah, so there was this constant thing of drugs, alcohol, fighting, stealing, anything to just rebel, be in trouble, anything that would be self-destructive and negative for myself. And that's how life was right up until the point of when my first son was born. I was still married at that time.
How old was you then?
Pardon?
How old was you then?
Around 21, 22.
Okay.
And then internally, I remember this little shift, well, big shift really, in as much as, oh God, responsibility. What do I do now? So it was very gradual. It was very gradual, but the very tiny steps, because this was over like an 8-9 year period, I would dip into a little bit of bother, but nothing on the grand scale of before. Mm-hmm. And then I would duck out again and think, oh no. So I had those moments still. It wasn't suddenly I'm a bad boy, I'm a good boy. It wasn't that at all. It was a gradual thing, something you would call conscience. I started getting pricked with this little conscience thing. And so over that period, responsible, dealing with the kids, and I had more subsequently as well, of course. And then got divorced because then I found, well, I won't put it on here, but reasons enough for me to want to think, do you know what, I need to look for something better.
For you to look for an exit route.
Yeah, I needed one badly because
Okay.
of circumstances, which I found and took.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you this little bit. Just before that, so in the last year of that relationship, in our family, none of us were remotely connected to or interested in anything of the bigger question, spiritually or otherwise. And yet, I walked into our bedroom one day in that last year in that situation, and one of those mini little pocket books, only about 4 inches by 3 inches, whatever, little book, laid on the bed covers. And I know for a fact, but she would have had no interest. That would have been in the bin, if anything. And there it was, a little book on the bed. And it said something about meditation exercises, blah, blah. And I just sat on the bed and I thought, I'll have a read at the first page just to inquire, nothing more. I wasn't going to do anything. And yet I opened the page, read the first couple of pages, an explanation and a little ritual, a practice of the method of a particular meditation. And I thought, you know what, sod it. I'll just give it a go. Just let's see what happens. So I sit there. I do exactly as the book entitled, breathe in, shut my eyes, try and expand myself. Imagine I'm in the stars, I'm in the universe, and journeying outwards in that, which I did. And I just felt fantastic. I was away with the fairies, I think, for about 15 minutes. And I came back and I thought, wow, never had that before.
This is better than any drug I've done in the past.
Yeah. And put it away and never read the book again, to be honest, but I didn't need to. Once that little door's open, it's open. The fact that you've connected with that source it knows, it recognizes and says, there's one, grab it. And that's what happens. And then at your own steady pace, it just leads you along this little path. And that's how things happened. I moved out. I got my own little flat. And I remember I had my room all sorted. I did a bit of work. I did a good job. I was working on the boat, so I was on excellent money. And so I was on about 800-900 quid a week on the boats. So I did 5 months of that. Didn't have to spend a penny because I ate and I slept on the boats, stashed it all. And then I got this little flat and I didn't need to go anywhere or do anything. And I hid myself away for about 3 months. I moved everything in my flat that was like, well, the TV and all the other essentials into my bedroom. And I shut the door. And of course, I come out for food. I might have gone for a visit to the shops, but on the whole, I was locked in my little.
Why did you decide to do that? What was the?
Yeah, good question. Good question. But it served me. It served me in that period in there. And I remember watching. There was a program on TV back in that day, and it was Des O'Connor. You might not remember him because obviously
I remember Des O'Connor. I'm not that young, Colin, but thank you.
Well, he used to interview people, and he was interviewing Cliff Richard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in bed. It's about 8:30 at night, and Cliff Richard is on, and he just turned. He'd gone into this born again Christian belief system, and Des said to him, "What brought you to that?" And then so Cliff says, well, listen, as much as people think money and fame buys you happiness, it absolutely doesn't. He said, I had plenty of both, but it wasn't enough. And I wasn't even that bothered about it. He said, it just occupied me. He said, but I had a long-term question in my head for years. And he said, on this particular day, I was at the bottom of things internally. And he said, I literally just spoke out in my room. If there's a God, then I want to know, I want to experience, I want a feeling, I want, give me something. That was his thing. And he said he just got this tremendous feeling within him, and he explained it all. And he said, and I knew I was on the path towards more fulfillment, true fulfillment. And I thought, you know what? If that's what it takes, I should do it. And in the same vein, I had no denomination. I had no particular faith. I still don't. Just because I say I'm a spiritualist, it's because a lot of their understanding aligns with me. But then there are aspects of it that don't. So I ignore the SNU part of it, and I just go with the spiritual aspect of it. And so I did it. And suddenly I'm laid there the following night. I didn't get any big epiphany instantly like Cliff did, but that next night, I did have a really wicked dream that evening that was very spiritual and beautiful. But the next day, I went and for some reason I bought myself a pad and a pen, and I thought I was going to do something particular with it. I had no idea what I was going to do. I thought that would just come in handy. I go to bed, and I wake up somewhere around 2-3 in the morning that night, the following night. And I remember I wrote a page of something, way too tired to read it. So I just literally threw it back on the floor, went to bed, forgot all about it, went back to sleep, got up in the morning, went and got my breakfast, came in. And as I've come back in to sit in bed and eat my cereal, I've trodden on the pad and the pen that was on the floor. And I thought, oh yeah, I wrote something last night. What was that all about? And I've got a print of it somewhere in a book in the attic. I need to get it out. And it was a Native American prayer. Oh, and I read it and I thought, I didn't write that. But you know your own vocabulary, your own knowledge base. I've never written a poem before that in my life, a prayer, something that rhymed as well.
And it was in your handwriting, Colin.
It absolutely was, yes. But I was taken aback by it. Subsequently and consequently, that happened for quite some time then. For a few years, I would get episodes of that. And then I was drawn to the local spiritualist church. And that's where my journey really started to stride deeper into it. Although still gradual, but it was much more definite steps then into that.
So by that stage, you was in your early 30s?
Yeah, I was.
Okay. What kept... So, because obviously you mentioned that you had this kind of meditation experience during this period of solitary confinement in your room. Were you meditating every day? Was at that stage, did that become? I
still had no idea about meditation back then, Joyce. I used to sit and ponder. So I used to sit quietly there. I was a big thinker. I am now. I've always been a big thinker internally. Maybe that's why my youth was, because I was always an overthinker. Now there's no such thing as overthinking. It's just working out. So the more I think, the better.
So, okay. So you get into your early 30s and you keep feeling this pull. It sounds to me like it's so a quest to know more. And it sounds to me like this kind of poem that you wrote was, really prompted something within you. That was a bit of a catalyst. So where did you go from there?
So from there, I kept writing lots of stuff, and then I was writing philosophy as well. There was a lot of philosophy that came out. I made the odd visit to the local spiritualist church, which was literally a quarter of a mile down the road from me. And then I remember in that flat of mine, which I loved my own space back then. I really did. And so consequently, since then, a lot of my life has been solitary, a lot of it. And I've traveled extensively. It just took me as how I wanted it to be. But I remember one day I was in my flat and there was a disgusting foul smell hovering around the whole flat. And just down the road, I thought the wind must be in the wrong direction, because on the banks of the river, just down a bit from me, there was a sewage works. And I thought, it's got to be the wind bringing that, wafting it up here. And yet, if you went outside the flat, you couldn't smell it. And I thought, something's either died in here, or I've left some mouldy food somewhere and I can't see it. Looked around the whole flat, couldn't find anything, but could smell it everywhere. Within a few minutes, half an hour, my brother has knocked the door, my youngest brother. And I've said, Tim, what are you doing? Come on in. He comes in. He says, Nicole, what's that smell? I said, I'm glad you said it, because I thought I was imagining it. I can't find it. We both hunted the flat. He said, there's nothing. I can't find anything. So he disappears later that day. I go that night. It was a Sunday. So I went to the local spiritualist church for the evening service. And I thought, let's just see what's really going on. I go in there. I sit right at the back, in the corner, out of the way, halfway down the seat, tucked behind the person in front of me. And I just listen. And there's an elderly lady, and the information that she was giving to people was quite, I mean, you don't know that person's life they're speaking to, but it was specific, the information she was vocalizing, and these people were accepting it. I'm thinking, oh, wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty clever. And we were getting to the end of the service, and I was just kind of pulling my stuff together, ready to go. And she said, and the last one, she said, I'd like to come to that young man at the back, ducking down behind that lady. And I'm not looking at her, because I put my head behind the lady in front of me. And she said, yes, you in the blue shirt. I was like, oh, that's me. So I've gone, yeah, that's me. And she's given me all this information about my mum's mum, who used to read tea leaves. She would read the flames. She'd concentrate on the flames in the fire, because in those days we had coal fires. And she would read those. She would do playing cards, all sorts of things. And she said her name's Edie. And I thought, bloody hell, she don't even know. She's got her name spot on, spot on. She said her name's Edie. And she said, and just before I go, she said, I'll tell you a couple of things. She said, one day, she said, you'll be stood here where I am. And I giggled, properly giggled, like no chance ever, no chance, never, not happening. And she said, oh, and I just want to give you a little bit of proof about something. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, today, she said, you were in your flat. She said, you were hunting high and low for that smell. And I was like, oh. Blimey. She said, let me just tell you this. Do you have an influence around you that is connected to the Native American culture? She said, in spirit. She said, and you belong to that culture sometime back in her life. And I got all goose pimply at the time, like I'm doing again. And she said to me, and when you used to go hunting for the buffalo, she said, all of you used to cover yourself in rancid bear grease so that the buffalo wouldn't smell you. And she said, and that's what you and your brother were smelling today.
Oh, my goodness. So I imagine that shocked you, Colin. I imagine that.
It did something. It did something.
So, my goodness, I can imagine because I've not had the exact same moment, but I've had a moment where, it just suddenly woke me up like never before. So, yeah. What an interesting story already so far. I feel like I've got so many questions, but equally, I don't want to stop the flow of the story because it's so interesting. So yeah. I'm going to let you carry on. So you have this almighty reading where I guess my first question is, did the smell disappear after this?
Yeah, it was gone. It was gone. Once it was acknowledged, it was gone.
Do you think you'd have gone to the spiritualist church if the smell wasn't there? Was that just what got you out the flat at the time?
No, I was going there anyway.
Oh, okay.
I'd forgotten all about the smell of the church. It wasn't even on my mind. So when it was brought to me, and by the way, just another little thing, 4 is a massive number for me, always has been right through my life for whatever reason, anything to do with 4s. They had a little raffle. So at the end of my message, and she also said to me, right, that's the end of your message, but the spirit said because in my bedroom where I put everything, I had a kind of a little shriney type thing I'd set up for some reason. And she said, the spirit want to say they're going to give you something for your dressing table. So I left it at that, thinking, what's that all about? They did the little raffle at the end. I bought a raffle ticket, number 44, and I had this lovely little set of blue china. I guess they could have been used for oil burners or ornaments. And that's what I won. I won the raffle with this lovely little set, and they went straight on my dressing table.
Straight onto the shrine. I've got a little shrine, Colin. Mine is getting a bit out of control, actually. It's becoming like a crystal palace. So where did you go next then? So you have this experience in the spiritualist church.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of little things, Jason. But if I try and think significance, big moves, big happenings, let's go forward somewhat. So I dibbled and dabbled for some years. Obviously, my mum was a medium and my stepdad was a medium. So I attended bits and pieces with them.
I was going to ask you about your mum, actually. I was going to say, did you sort of ever delve more into her mediumship and kind of spirituality?
Yeah, well, it was only later on then that my mum started, because then I started. So that moment where you mentioned before, so I moved from that flat and into the property of another lady who had a spare room, because the flat I was in it was getting sold. So I had to find somewhere, and I moved to an area called Eastleigh down my way.
I know that area.
Yeah, I moved in with a lady there who had a little son, and I had a little spare room, and I was there a while. And then one night she said to me, "Colin, I'm going down to sit in a little group that I sit in, a little meditation group." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Didn't have any real knowledge about a meditation group, although I'd obviously since heard the word meditation, etc. And she said, "Why don't you come along?" I said, "Well, there's nothing on telly, is there?" I said, "Yeah, all right, I'll come." I went, sat in that group, and subsequently I sat in that group for almost 6 years. And
wow.
Yeah, and loved it so much. And now in a lot of groups you sit and people say, "Oh, well, I had this happen, I had that happen." What did you see? What did you do? I was never encouraged, not by the people around me, they often shared bits, but I was encouraged somewhere, somehow, for me to keep everything to myself and not to express or to vocalize what I was experiencing. Although you would have thought sensibly it would be good to ask, "Oh, I felt this. Could you perhaps tell me?" But I've learned a lot that there are so many differing opinions in that area that it would just cause conflict and confusion within me. And so I stuck to my guns. I trusted what I felt, even though I didn't know what I was trusting. I just kept it. And I look back now and I'm glad, because I had none of the dogma, none of the this, none of that, no other opinions, no conflict in anything. I trusted what I felt and I went with it. Best teacher I ever had. You don't need, all right, to learn the basics, maybe of some understandings of spiritual principles, fine. But the teacher, for me, was always the spirit.
I find that so interesting. Do you know why? Because I have heard that before, that the only person you need to learn from is yourself. And I've been from teacher to teacher to teacher, and actually I haven't really progressed a whole lot. Don't get me wrong, my technical understanding of the spirit world and knowing, how it works as such. But I find it interesting as well that you was in this group for 6 years. Did it not naturally come up one day, someone saying to you, "Well, Colin, what are you experiencing?"
I would have lied.
Oh, I see.
I would have lied, so I wouldn't have been able to, I wouldn't have given it. I would have kept it to myself, and I would have just said, "Well, nothing happened. I just sat quietly. I didn't see anything, didn't hear anything." I would have just said that.
What was you experiencing during
Well,
that period?
I didn't
Are you
know until
able to talk
after.
about it now, Colin, or are
Yeah,
you
yeah,
still
yeah, for
keeping
sure.
stum?
Yeah. No, it's good now. Well, I look back, actually, a lot of what I realized was happening was years after. When I look back, and
Ah,
once I gained experience and knowledge of energy, of connecting with spiritual personalities, then I realized what those I'd been experiencing. At the time, I had ideas because I felt particular and definite things. So I didn't go off into these far flung places and see lots of color or angels or this or that. So we were sat in the dark and there was one little tea light candle that would be sat over there.
mhm.
And it was just enough to kind of cast a little shadow, no definite light of any description. And yet, after a first few sits in that group, second, third, fourth week, something like that, I would shut my eyes, but with my eyes shut, I would see this massive red glow as if you're looking at the sun with your eyes closed. And I can remember that red glow within my, yeah, it was strange. It was unusual for me. And then I would just let it go. I never judged anything. I never in my mind panicked if I felt something very unfamiliar and different and weird. I would just let it happen. That was my nature anyway, which I'm glad of because I didn't halt anything. I let it be because I felt safe. I felt comfortable wherever occurred. And then I started feeling manipulated in as much as I had the circle of people around me, same as I was around them. And I found myself being manipulated in as much as with my eyes closed, I felt like I was gazing at the individuals around me with my eyes closed and that there was someone that was using a part of me to just express themselves to a very small degree physically. I felt something. I didn't feel myself. And that's the only knowledge I would have had about it. That was,
You made a few interesting points that I want to pick up on there because I'm trying to develop my mediumship, Colin, and I I don't want to go over this too much because people are going to be bloody sick of hearing this story because it's not the first time I've mentioned it. But I have been sitting there, forcing things, sitting there with expectation. And I think the point you make about you sitting there with no expectation, no wanting, just being there by yourself, not allowing the outside influence of anyone else, and to just experience and feel. There is so the simplicity of it, but actually what you were doing was, not giving your power away to other people or
exactly.
teachers or
And
mentors as such. Well, yeah, and that was a mistake I made at the beginning. I was trying to go from teacher to teacher to teacher. And then after months and months and months, this is the madness of it, Colin. I even started a bloody podcast about mediumship, learning from all these people. Then suddenly it hit me one day. I thought, Jason, you haven't developed at all because you've got all these different methods and you don't know what you're doing. I'm probably the most knowledgeable beginner medium you've ever met, Colin, who hasn't developed really much at all. But I understand the mechanics of and the beauty of what you did at that point in your life. When you were sitting there in these groups, you would go in and what would be going through your mind? But I'm just going to go and sit there and see what
yeah.
happens.
hmm
And
No
was you trying to do
expectation.
anything? Was you trying to, build your energy, push your aura
No,
out? No?
I didn't know. I mean, apart from that very first experience I told you about, that was history then. So this was a different environment. And I didn't know if those laws applied to this, the understand, whatever. So I just literally sat and thought, I wonder what's going to happen
And you would concentrate. So your focus would be on that of your breath.
for a little bit. Basically,
Okay.
I just sat there with my eyes shut and did and said and thought nothing.
Do you know the funny thing about this is there's so many people out there that pay all this money for courses, me included, Colin. I'm no exception.
Been there.
And the beauty of it is when you actually strip it all back, it's so simple. You know, we are spirit. We're not trying to relearn something that we're not. That is what we are. So I think I wanted to stop you on that point, because I do think that there is a real lesson to be learned there. And I can really see that from what you did. So you started having all these experiences. It sounds to me like you were kind of, you know, having out of body experiences, and spirit were kind of coming in and assisting you in various ways. So where did you go from this point of having these internalized experiences that you weren't sharing with anyone, you were keeping them internal? When did you come out the closet, Colin?
So, I always say to people, Jace, if you have trouble trying to find where you think your path lies, I mean, from a spiritual perspective, if you have a gift, what is it? Where do I use it? In what road do I go down? I say to people, well, because this is how things progressed from there for me. So initially in that little meditation, so-called meditation group, which was actually more than that, because it turned into a very spiritually energetic group where people were building, not just me in that instance, but the others. And mine was of a different nature of energy to those that were sat around me. There were all different kinds of people there, heading in different directions, but for the same cause. So people started coming to me, or I got introduced to people, or got invitations via other people to things and events and people of a very spiritually physical, so the physical phenomena aspect of that thing. I don't know if you know of a lady, she died, God bless her, Jean Skinner.
I don't.
Well, if you could Google her and you could ask people, she was absolutely the best transfiguration medium of her time in the UK, and maybe greater across Europe. She was phenomenal. I ended up meeting her at Stansted. I was a newbie, my first visit ever, knew nothing, but her and we just gravitated. She was a little short, 5 foot nothing, chubby little Geordie girl. She was pushing on to the 60s and some years, and I was obviously just over my 30s, but we connected. And another lady we both connected with was an Irish lady, Letitia, who ran a healing centre and other things in Dublin, in a place called Raheny. So, short story, we got invited over there. So I shared a house in Ireland with Jean, and she did her transfiguration demonstrations here and there in Ireland. And one of these nights, when you think Catholic Ireland, 30 years ago, to bring this kind of thing. So we're in there, we've got this big hall. There's about 200 chairs laid out, and it's in the pitch black. She's got the cabinet, she's got the red light, all set up properly. And she used to say to me, Colin, you're here just to encourage them to speak, because people freeze, don't they, when they're asked direct by the spirit. So I would try and invoke a bit of conversation or a perspective or something. So I'm sat on the side of the wall, and Jean is in front of me to the left, facing the audience, looking right. And obviously the audience are facing her the other way. So she goes into a trance state, absolutely phenomenal. She changes 100% physically. Little Chinese fella, her silvery grey hair disappears. Her face goes slim. Her whole manner is totally different. And so she's giving this information to the audience. I have a connection with so-and-so. And I think, oh, I recognize that, but obviously it's not me. I'm sat over out the way. And then she gives another piece of information and another. No one in the audience can take it. And then she says, I want to, so I have somebody here that plays a mean fiddle, which she actually meant violin, but she used the term fiddle. And I thought, well, I know a girl that plays the violin. None of the audience are taking it, and I'm still sat there dumb as anything. And then I see the gesture of this spirit personality slightly turn its head towards me, give me a kind of a look, turn back, and then say, I have to connect the name of Neil to this person. My brother's name is Neil. And then I'm a bit more intrigued. I'm thinking, oh, hang on a minute. And then she looks at me again as if to say, are you going to respond or not? And I still said nothing. And then she says, this connection is with somebody in this room from England. The rest are all Paddies. I'm the only Englishman. And I'm thinking, could that be me? And she gave out this big sigh as if to say, oh, thank God. And so she called me over. I sat in the chair. Short story. I saw my actual nan, both my nan's faces, transfigure in full form over her face, smiling at me. Both my nans. The energy, the emotion was tearful. You couldn't help but cry. I don't care what sort of a big man you are. You cry, and you will. And then at the very end, there was her little chubby moon face changed to this long, high cheekbone, massively strong jaw. You could see the long hair with plaits coming down on it. And it was this Native American. You couldn't mistake it. And no words were exchanged. Well, not vocally, let me tell you, but his eyes, when they say that you can look into the soul through the eyes, he physically, literally did that to me, looked right into me, and something exchanged, something deep exchanged. It got me like I've never been got in my life.
Wow.
I was uncontrollable. I was in a state of, oh my God. And that was that moment. And so therefore I was drawn into that realm of all this physical phenomena. I went and got invited to all these other things. Stuart Alexander, I saw a few times for a lucky invitation, if you like. And the things I saw there, and trance mediums, I started going to see those because it just felt the right thing to do. People used to phone me, Colin, there's this trance medium on. Have you seen it before? I said, no, come and have a look. I'll pick you up. And off I would go. And then consequently, years later, I found myself, I moved into a bungalow, and I think I had one lovely room that was all wooden, and it had that window seat with the window chest, the wooden seated box, that sits in the window. Beautiful room. I painted all the walls terracotta, and I built a little cabinet myself, and I started sitting in it. Didn't know why, what. I just did. Just sat in it, meditated. Excuse me, in this little cabinet affair. I met a fella in a church. A lady said to me because we moved on a few years now. I must be into my 40s. Mm-hmm. I met a lady and I got on with her great. She was she was the head of the Southern District Council. She was a friend of a friend. So I'd sat with her also for a while because I'd sat with different groups. And she said to me, Colin, we were in the church one day and she said, this church is going to close soon. But she said, I'm being told that I need you to run it. I had a few things go on in my life. I had a big motorcycle accident. And it coincided with me being where I had this injury. I wasn't able to work, not physically, but I was able to do other things. And she said to me, I want you to run the church. And I thought, there's no way I'm getting involved in all those politics. However, we went upstairs for tea and cake. By the time I got to the top of the stairs, something had switched between down there and up here. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. So instead of the church being closed because of the lack of attendance, we got a committee together of some lovely people, most of them. And we got that church going. It was full within a month. It was full every event, and we had such a beautiful range of younger people, middle-aged, elderly, family, and it was phenomenal. And we got voted Church of the Year by the SNU in our first year. So
Wow.
that was divine. That
Colin,
was
I can imagine you running a church. I would be in there every week without fail at your church. I can assure you of that. What?
It was good.
Blimey, what a story so far. And it made me
Yeah.
laugh, you building the cabinet. I thought, I don't know why I'm building it. I don't know why I'm sitting in it, but I've got a cabinet. What's the logic behind the cabinet? What is the logic of it?
A lot of people, you could, Jace, just say, you know what, it's about state of mind.
Mm.
And it's old school method. You'll find that a lot of trance mediums or physical mediums these days don't necessarily use the cabinet. And they even do it in a lot. So you could do it in a church or a room with the lights on. You can do trance.
Is it kind of like, because you know you're in there, it's like the place you do it, and it's kind of, it almost, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word for it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like a ritual by going in there.
Yeah, for sure. But there were two reasons for me, Jace. One is, so you can't just think about yourself, what's good for me. I know that if you get a very blacked out, beautifully dark room with a red light, then if there is energy, if you're doing things right and you've got that energy and the spirit are working with you, visually for the public in the dark with a red light, they would definitely see much more than they would in the white light. I'm going to bend down for my charger. Oh, where are you?
That's all right.
Oh, it's not there. I've got 20% battery left.
Oh, don't worry, Colin. I think we're gonna be coming to the end soon.
Right, we should be all right for a minute anyway.
We'll be all right.
So, yeah. So visually, for an observer, if you're doing a demonstration, and I've proved it, they see so much more of like the colors, the lights, and if there's any spirit personalities that are joining you, they get to see all of that as well. They see the energy. So it's a good thing. It works.
I want to ask you about to sort of delve into another area, because we can't get to the end of the episode without asking about the impact your time with the Crow tribe had on you.
Yeah. That was I say a life change. It's just, what did it do? I mean, it was an internal thing, Jace, to be honest. First of all, they did a little ceremony, and historically now it's recorded within the tribe, historically, as the first, from the Crow tribe, first Sundance in England. And I was invited to that. I went along to it. My hair, by the way, back then used to be plaited, and it was right down by my belt.
Oh, what's it? I can't imagine that.
Yeah, honestly, long black hair. My skin always, I mean, we're only at the beginning of summer now, but my skin always goes very, very dark. In the good summer, in the good sun, my skin goes extremely dark. And I always had this thing, I used to wear all the beads and everything like that. So even friends and things would say to me, you look like a Native American, even before any of this stuff. I was always regarded in that respect. And I always had a huge fascination since a kiddie. I remember at 5, 6, 7 years old collecting all the figureheads from Kellogg's Cornflakes of all the old Indians, Sitting Bull, Cochise, Red Cloud, all of them, even as a kiddie. So, yeah, I did that first Sundance, which is a 3-day prayer event. It's a total fast, no food, no water for 3 days. There is a theme to the Sundance. So this one, I believe, back then, the first one was against the abuse of children. That was the 3-day prayer for everyone. It was out in the open. You had a sleeping bag and a little bit of tarpaulin in case it rained. But you did your prayers and the singing and all of that over there. And consequently, I went over to America and I stayed with the Sundance leader in a place called Bear Canyon, which was in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. So it was a section of the Rocky Mountains, Bear Canyon. It was called Bear Canyon for a good reason, because there were lots of black bears there, obviously. And we were very close to Yellowstone Park, very close. So on his land, he had a sweat lodge. So I did a lot of sweats and things, which are healing ceremonies, prayer ceremonies, all of that within it. To talk about all the tribal stuff is another hour, at least, in itself. So I'll have to condense this for you considerably.
You're making a case, Colin, to come back on here.
Well, if ever you want,
episode 2, the tribal episode.
Yeah, but it's a magnificent thing for me, absolutely, to talk about.
Give us some of the main value-adding changes it had on your life as a result of your time there.
Okay, so my teacher over there, the Sundance leader, known as Enamani, but if you remember, the Americans took their Native American names away from them and gave them English names. So his name growing up was Scott Frazier, even though his tribal name was Enamani. But I still talk to him now, but he's a phenomenal, still is, absolutely. And he has been one of the highlights of my life as far as being taught, and not just as a teacher, but as a friend, and as such a lovely connection I have with that guy. And so he taught me all about herbs, about how to pick herbs. You just don't go and pick things and chuck them in a bag. We went out to the mountains to pick white sage that they used in the sweat lodge because it's healing. You can put it under your bed when you sleep, for healing, for sleep, for protection, all of these things. And so we go up there and he shows me, and we get to this massive area where there's lots of this white sage. And he brought a pouch of tobacco with him, which is sacred also. So we go to this group that I would have referred to of sage. And he said to me, no, this is a family. And they're the small ones are the children. And then you go up and these are the parents. And then these big bushy ones, they're the grandparents. He said, you can't touch the children and you can't touch the parents because they don't have the knowledge that the grandparents do. And the parents have to nurture the children. So you can't touch those either. He said, but you can't take all the grandparents because then there's no one to pass the knowledge down to the others. He said, so we will pick 1 or 2 from each family, and in their place, we will give sacred tobacco. So when you pull a plant out, you put sacred tobacco back in the hole that you took it from, because tobacco is very sacred. If I make a deal with you about doing something, we will shake hands, but we will exchange tobacco. Depends who offers the deal. If I say to you, Jace, will you do this? You say, yeah, I will. You will give me a pouch of tobacco or tobacco in some form. You can't break that ever. If you give me tobacco, you got to do. There's no break. There's not even a thought. It happens. You will.
It's a contract. The deal is done, as they say,
it's
Colin.
It's done. Finished. Yeah. You cannot even think about not doing it. It's done. So I learned that about herbs and many other things in relation to plants. Everything is sacred. Everything is equal. Rocks, water, every plant, every form of natural order, life on the planet, whatever it is equal to you. Equal. When we ever crossed the river, we would put our hands in the water and you would touch the water to your heart and then to your head, and then you would cross the water. He would never swim in the sea because for him, water was too sacred to be swam in. And that's the way it was. If you went hunting, there would be a ceremony first for the hunt. You didn't have to look for the animal the next day because you knew, because of the ceremony, that animal knew it was going to present itself for you. The animal would be there. And then when you had shot whatever, put the animal down, you would run fast to the animal. You would kneel down. You would put your mouth to its mouth. You would take your right hand and you would push down on the lungs of the animal, and it would exhale its last breath. As it exhaled that breath, you would breathe it in. And then you would say to that animal, thank you for offering yourself. I would take your last breath and you and me will go forward together.
Oh, wow.
So that animal still existed within you. And then it wasn't in vain.
I want to go and spend time with a tribe, Colin. This sounds amazing.
It's phenomenal.
What a way to live life.
The last thing I did with them was called the Vision Quest. So we'd come back from Missouri, couple of thousand miles, where we did another sun dance, which was torturous actually because it was so hot. No food, no water. But like I say, these ceremonies, there's so much more to them, Jace. It's an easy hour talk. And so we come back. We'd only been back a few days, and we're in his pine-built house in the mountains. And he's pointed out. He said to me, "You need to do another dance." I said, "You're kidding. We've only just come back. I'm knackered. I need another few days." And he said, no. And he pointed out the window and he said, no, up there. And he's pointing to the mountain. So I knew exactly what he meant. Anyway, I'll try and make this short because I know we're getting short of time. So I dreamt before I'd left England that I was going to be up a mountain. However, now we're in Montana, bears, wolves, all of this. I'm like, I really don't know if I want to be sat on top of a mountain on my own. So anyway, short story, all these ceremonies are done on a full moon. So he said to me, well, let me know. So I go to bed that night. I pray like a devil. I'd like to do the thing, but I'm too scared, blah, blah, all of that. Night after night, I go to bed, pray, wake up with no different thought. That's the way it was. One morning, I wake up and it's as if like, where was the indecision ever? Why was there any indecision? So I've gone straight to my cabinet to pick up the tobacco because that's the deal. That's the deal. And I've turned round and he's already stood at the door behind me with his hand out. And he knew. I put the tobacco in his hand. He's given me a big hug, 6'3", Native American. He was actually Sioux Indian, adopted into the Crow by Thomas Yellowtail. And so we do the deal. He says, right, you've got until 11 o'clock tonight to eat and drink. But because you're going to be fasting, you don't eat and drink. You keep it minimal. You don't want to shock your system. That night, he said to me, by the way, that day was the first night of the full moon. So if I'd have left it a day later, it was too late. We'd have to wait for the next full moon. So that day was critical. We go out in front of the full moon that night and he says to me, right, stand there, face the full moon. And he said to me, you can only go, he said, you go up on the mountain to get your medicine. And he said, but you have no medicine. So who's going to protect you while you're up there? He said, I've been up there. I'm going to lend you now my medicine so that while you're sat up there, you're protected. So he's got an eagle feather fan. He stands there behind me. I'm facing the moon. He pats me down all around and he's chanting in his Sioux language, a Sioux prayer, a Sioux blessing, pats me all around. Then we're done. I'm up, crack of dawn in the morning. Sunrise, we do a little sweat lodge. He kept it short because obviously you lose your water content in the sweat lodge. I'm going to be without water and food for 3 and a bit days. So ideally, don't want to sweat too much. He was very kind to me. He kept it short. Everything I wore was fresh, clean wash because of the scent for bears and wolves and stuff. My luggage, my bag, I had herbs. He had explained to me all these herbs and the way I was to set out my place when I got to the top of the mountain. So I took notice of that. I had all these lovely little drawings because don't forget everything that I did had to be sanctioned by the tribe as well, which I forgot about. So he'd gone to the tribe, said, look, I got this white boy from England. I want him to do the vision quest. I want him to sit up the mountain. Can he do it? They've obviously said yes, do it. And now I've had all these little pictures drawn by tribal kids and everything, so with a picture of this matchstick white man sat on top of a mountain and all these little blessings and things. I was given some of these little beaded gifts that they sent me for protection and everything. So I've gone up the mountain. We've got in his pickup truck. We've gone along. You see, there's so much more to tell you about this.
There is, Colin. I honestly think we have to get you back on to talk about all of this
I would love to talk
tribal.
about this.
Yeah, I do, because we haven't really talked about that on. Well, yeah, and do you know what? It's so interesting because I think that to talk to you about the experiences, what you went through, the impact that has on your life, how you live your life now. I think we're going to have to get you back on, Colin, to do part 2, I think, at some point in the future.
Yeah, I'd love that.
But do you know what? I honestly, and I'm sure I'm speaking for all of the listeners as well, have absolutely loved this conversation, Colin. And there is no time limit. I could go for another hour. I just don't know if anyone else can right now. But I just want to say a sincere thanks. I think that your story is a really incredible one. And to go from rebellious teen to suicide attempt to being locked in a room of confinement to be, the world's most inward meditator who's not sharing anything. Honestly, it's a beautiful story. And I thank you for sharing it with us.
Do you know what? I'm grateful to be able to talk about it. It's nice to express things, you know, all about your past, like you say, about the destructive, the prison stuff.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of that, all that I went through in that early stage, like the probation service, I was under the probation. I had to do community service. I went to prison for a year. All the drugs and alcohol aspect. How it ever happened, I don't know. But I ended up working for the probation service. I worked in the prison. I got a set of keys to work in the prison with drug and alcohol clients. I've worked in some very specialist care, like forensic care. All of these aspects of different caring.
It's funny how things work out, isn't it? It really is.
It's so perfect. That's when you realize how perfect that power, that life, that is.
Well, it's even, I think to myself, I was a police officer, went through a bloody awful time in the police, and then I find myself now owning a legal recruitment agency that recruits lawyers.
Wow.
The synchronicity of it, you just couldn't make it up, could you?
No, you couldn't.
Well, Colin, that leaves me to say a massive thank you for coming onto the Soul Sync.
Well, I'm very grateful. Thank you, Jace. I've really enjoyed it with you, mate, to be honest. Loved it.
Oh, good.